Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a SOCA researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy.
So my name is Julian Velarde. I'm coming in from Harupa Valley here in California, Southern California. What I do professionally in my current role is I'm a diversity inclusion coordinator for the Orange County Fire Authority, and I'm coming up on 5 years that I've been with this organization. And prior to that, I had about 20 years in higher education.
Hi, Julian. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have you on the podcast. Truly, we go back
Yes, we
to
do.
my years as, undergrad at SOCA
Yes, we do.
University of America.
Yes.
That's where you were working
Mhm.
in student affairs,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
I recall just how bright your energy was and how loving you were and really wanting to support the students there, building out really incredible opportunities for students, as well as programming that I really felt brought the campus closer together, and it tied in with the work that you're continuing to do in the DEI space of really recognizing everyone's unique strengths, but also the value that comes with really embracing diversity, learning across diversity, and just respecting one another. And I just find that you really embody that, and that bright light and spirit that you had when I was a student continues to shine bright in your current career in Orange County with the fire department, right? And I would love to just ask you more about how did you get to be this bright light of really kind of building community and really helping students feel like they belong, right? That they are important. That's something that I believe you really excel at, and would love to hear from you. What were some of the major influences along your journey as an educator?
Wow, that's a great question. And I definitely have to start, like many, my roots begin with really my childhood. And I don't know if you know this story, Scott, but I guess this is, I'm going to share, because it really, that's where everything begins. And I am who I am today because of how my life began. And it's so interesting. It's directly related to my passion, what I do, why I do the work I do, and I call it the human work. It has other names to it, like DEI and whatnot, social justice, but it's the human work that I'm about. But I want to take it back to my childhood. So I'm one of 14 children, and I had a brother who is just the next one older than me, who him and I were in foster care. And we grew up. I was an infant when I was put into foster care. My brother was about a year and 4 months older than me, so he was already a young boy, and so we were put into foster care. And I think it was those years of being in that experience. I had foster parents that grew up in the 1920s. My foster father was a World War II veteran. My foster mother was a stay-home mom. She loved being right with kids. She wanted to raise kids, lots of kids. And so they became foster parents at a later point in their lives. And so that's how it began for me in terms of just my entry point into the world. And as I got older and more aware, right, my brother and I both, in terms of where we came from and really what that experience was about, um, and then being adopted, right, there was this theme that people wanted to care for other humans, right, that did not necessarily come from them, right? And this notion that they had a heart to want to be involved in a young person's life, to give them an opportunity to have a life, and that really happened through the foster care context for me, and then being in my adopted family. We were adopted once, and that was a one and done. With that family, I was 7, my brother was 9 at the time, and they have been our adopted parents, have been our parents since then. And they were really key in really taking us on from that point of our early childhood to grow on us responsibility, right? All the things that, parents want to do with their kids, right? To make sure that they get a positive, step out in the world when it's time for them to leave the home. And so my adopted parents played a really key role in that, as well. In that family, I had two sisters, and so we were a family of six, and so yeah, those are my early years with that. And again, I think as I look back and as I was growing again into my own awareness and maturity as a human being, I was connecting the dots that, it's about caring for others, right? It's really about doing what you can to improve the lives of other people. And that's what was done for my brother and I, right? And, my biological parents did what they could, but, they were just they didn't have the resources and the ability to raise as many kids as they had, and so thank goodness there were resources beyond their existence, right? That, could give my brother and I an opportunity to have, a successful life. And I can tell you that we have, my brother went on to, he had a career in the Air Force and retired. And I went on to, follow my path and journey. As part of that was 10 years. I was at one point with working at Soka University and working some life. But I found my joy and passion in education and being an educator, being a supporter, and I think an enabler of young people, right, to reach their dreams and goals. And so you can see directly there, what is within me to do this work has its roots in my early childhood and
Yeah.
my family experience growing up.
Thank you, Julian, for sharing about that childhood of yours. That in a way, it was a big disruption, right? Given the sense that from like one family to the next, you were already several years old. I think you said 6 or 7 years old.
I was 7 when I was adopted. Officially, we were officially adopted. And then my brother was 9 at the time, just turning 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in kind of navigating that big change within your life, um, I'm sure that there were certain kind of shifts in terms of just the dynamics, not just with the newly, like the new family that you had, but even between you and your brother, and then the new set of siblings that you were stepping into, and yeah, and I'm just wondering, like, what was it like for you stepping into that new environment? You said that they w- they were very caring, and it got you into the work of really understanding like what DEI and belonging is. But I'm sure that there were some difficulties initially in kind of sorting through maybe the new kind of like family that you were being welcomed into. But yeah, could you share a little bit more in terms of like what was that like in the early phases, and then how that
Yeah.
kind of evolved over time?
Well, yes, and understanding anything about children, right, and their how they see things, right? It's all about latching on to those who are showing love and care, and and providing a safe space, right, for you to be, and knowing that you don't have to worry about your basic living, and and all of that, and I think so. My foster family, just to put that in context. I mean, in 7 years, I still I have dreams of my foster father and mother, and even though they've been long past, because of the impression they made on me. Um, and so I think for my brother and I both, when we were adopted, right, I remember our social worker having our bags ready to go when we were literally at that point to be now officially transferred, from our foster home to right our new adopted family. And you can imagine the roller coaster ride emotionally with that, and just we thought we were prepared, but we weren't. I mean, emotionally, it was a really, really difficult time, and you don't realize, how much you were, you cling to certain people when you realize you're being taken away from them, right? And how much, you were just like for us, we were just so comfortable with the reality of just being raised by our foster parents that we thought, okay, well, this is where we're going to be. And even though we were somewhat like coached on, you're going to be there's a new family that's going to, take you, and they want you, and they want to, they're really happy about that, and they're excited, and and so they did everything they can. Our social worker and foster parents were working together to try to build that positivity for us to leave, but it was really a challenge. So that was a really real difficult moment. It's like yesterday when I think about it. I remember how hard that was to separate. Um, but it was part of the journey. And so stepping into a brand new family, I mean, at 7 and 9 years of age, that we had things that were already impressed upon us, right? It just certain just experiences, our personalities, right? We were used to just seeing certain people, and then and kids as well beyond us. And now we're in a completely new environment, right? And having to make that shift literally overnight, if you can imagine that, you know, very difficult for kids of that age, right? To just do that and feel like it's going to be smooth, and not without its rough edges, but it definitely was. um and so there was some challenges, right? Just getting into a new home, a new set of rules, of how they did family, and where we fit in that. God, what's interesting, right, is that those lessons that we were learning, right? Those life lessons of like how to adapt, right, to something new, how to, you know, not necessarily forgetting where you came from, but having to make that transition, right, a life transition. That was ingrained in us early on, right? And then, but seeing that you know newness, can really bring some really amazing things, as you also are giving up other things, right, that you were familiar with, right? And that was a part of just your day to day and your norm, right? So it taught us a lot of lessons, honestly. And again, I know where my heart and my spirit is today, and why I have chosen to pursue the life that I've had, right? Especially in the work I do. It's because those life lessons and values were instilled in my brother and I, at in those formative years. And it doesn't make transition, easy no matter what, right? But it's that's a life skill we developed. It was how to be able to just adapt, right, to change, and not necessarily see change as something to fear, right, completely, but that you know there is breakthrough on the other side of that fear, right? If we're open to it, right? We were forced to let go of a branch we were holding on to, and put into a new, situation, that just taught us so many things about life, and how to roll with it, and how
Mm,
to make the most of circumstances, when they're not as ideal as you would prefer. And and
right.
and I've taken those lessons to work with young people because of what I learned, what was, what I went through, and knowing that those life lessons would resonate eventually with many of the young people that I've had the blessing and opportunity to mentor, to walk alongside, and just to be a life partner and a journey, right? Many of you as students, I've even known from you were 18, 19, and now you're well into your adult years, and we have such deep relationships and connections that I just you just can't. I mean, what a life, um, and what a great life in that sense for me. And I think again, I've had a lot of time and I'm well onto my years now, and now I could see kind of the end of my career in terms of, retirement coming up, right? So in the next, another 10 or 12 years, but, so I've had a lot of time to really think about it and do my work right on me and all those things that I've gone through, right? To where I can look back, now, I think with more gratitude, right? For what has happened and why certain things had to happen in certain stages of my life, because ultimately it's made me who I am. And it's actually also deepened my spiritual, life and my faith as well, right? That had come into a context for me when I was in high school, just before I went off to college, which was a great, kind of turning point for me too. So,
Well, I do want to ask you more about that turning point before going to college, and also about the spiritual dimension that you're talking about. How there was a moment where it really, I don't know if the word is clicked or it sparked, and then that ignited something much bigger and kind of it allowed you to really grow
Absolutely.
your like certain convictions, and then also create this understanding of like why certain events happened. But I did want to make a brief comment before that, in
Yes.
saying that these life transitions that we all go through can be very difficult. They can be even traumatic. They can be unwanted in the moment, and yet life continues on, and sometimes it feels like a current that's just sweeping us along, and we go along either like kicking and screaming, or we go along and we're just kind of floating on our backs and like enjoying. But what you talked about in terms of these deeper lessons of like really how to adapt to change, how to navigate those life transitions, these are all something that I think everyone can really resonate with, that will be faced with. But when you talk about your childhood, right, just how abruptly it all happened, from your biological family to a foster care, to adopted family, I mean, all in relatively quick succession. Um, those imprinted something deeper in terms of like your appreciation for family and community, and I think also really extended your capacity for compassion. And so from what I'm hearing, this there's also this through line of just really being able to like recognize those around you who are extending grace and being compassionate, and for you to truly absorb that and say, wow, that's kind of what I want to do. That's what I want to kind of give back in your own way. So now, I wanted to pass it back to you and ask, because it sounds like there was an important, you know, transition point that you were going to share a little bit more about, and I'd love for you to bring up the spiritual and or religious kind of component, because I know that that's
Absolutely.
something core to who you are as well. So please.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, and thank you for acknowledging that. Yes, and as many of you know, I've shared throughout just, and you've seen in my life, many of the students, right, how faith has been a big part of just even my young adult into who I am today as well, and it's deeply shaped my direction in addition to those formative years. So in that high school period, it was my senior year. I think in the 3 years of high school, as a result of things that happened to me, that I was becoming, like I said, had a deeper awareness of just my own kind of existence at that point, right? And like certain events that had happened, and there was the trauma, right, the separation. There were things that happened with my brother, and in our own struggle, and I was really trying to find a sense of purpose. Like, so what does all this mean, right? Like, what do I do with it? Like, I'm going to be leaving home and going to college. I was with UC Santa Cruz, got accepted there, um, and I was going. I like, this is it. This is the next step in my journey, in my evolution as a human being. And so I think that deep search for meaning was something that I was really starving for, wanting to understand, like, how did all these life events, lead up to this moment for me, right? And who was I going to be, right? Not what my mom and dad told me to be or what they expect me to be, but who did I want to really be? Where was my resolve? And so it started with that essential, it's kind of existential question, like, that what is my purpose? Like, why did all of this even happen? Why am I even here? There was a high school friend of mine, a female friend of mine that I had gotten to know, and I just had seen something about her that was just really unique from other students and friends that I knew. She just had a certain walk about her, a certain way that her character, her personality, she was very just amazing and caring, and just, she had a sense of maturity about her that I didn't really see in a lot of my peers, right? And so I was curious, like, so who is this? What's this person about? And as I got to find out more about her, and we became good friends, we both ran track and field together, right? And all that, and found out that her dad's a pastor, and her mom was, involved with supporting, the church where her dad pastored as a worship leader. She played the piano and was an amazing musician, and so that led into further questioning, like, so wow, like, where these are who shaped this individual, and I want to know more about this, right? And so one thing led to another, and I think for me it led eventually into um, diving into the Bible, right? And this is and from a Christian faith perspective, and the parallels that I was seeing in my life for that time, that first time that beyond me, right? That here is this piece of literature that is living and breathing today, and it was just like I was looking at my life in a mirror. That's the best way I can describe it. Of just the what I was reading, it came into fullness for me. And one of the most powerful sort of revelations of that was, I'm a professed Christian, a born again Christian. I believe in Jesus as my savior, and I don't hide that. This is who I am, and what has really, I think, deepened who I am as a human being, and like I said, why I really do the work I do. Um, but I found the story of adoption in the scriptures that I'd never had been seen and heard about. And there's more to that too, but it just, again, that was the thing that really opened my eyes, that, that I was not born as an accident, that I have a true purpose, that my Lord and Savior, my creator God has a path for me, and has, as Jeremiah says, he wants to give me a life and a purpose for being. And it just clicked at that moment, Scott, for me. And I can say the rest is history, literally, but because my trajectory beyond that point, it took off, because at that point, I now knew that I truly had a purpose for living. I was born into this world to do something, to contribute something. And we call it a soka, right? The value, right? Creating value. The parallel was there spiritually for me, right? It's like I was born to create value, to be a contributor, to live a life of purpose. With everything that has happened, that God would use that to grow me as a person, to fulfill my mission and calling in life. And that's where eventually I got into education, because I wanted to.
Amazing.
Yes. And that's probably a story you have not heard before.
No, I have not. And,
And
but
yeah.
again, from like knowing you as part of the admin team and student affairs, and, I think actions really speak, for themselves. It's so clear that, like, of course, this is like the deeper roots and the foundation of like who you are. I think when we really stop to look at those individuals who stand out, there's a certain quality about them that kind of just, I don't know, resonates, and that you think, wow, they're amazing. How did they get to be the way they are? Um, it's these kind of backstories that are really at play, but they're kind of like hidden underneath, right? Because it's the root system that keeps us standing tall, and I find that to be so similar to the story that you shared about this friend of yours in high school that really just kind of walked the talk, basically, and need no further convincing of just, wow,
Yeah.
she's a good person, and you
Absolutely.
felt there was something, there must be something to this, and that you then decided, let me try it out. And I find that that's probably the most convincing way to introduce anyone to a spiritual practice. It's really to have them explore for themselves and make those connecting points. And I really appreciate this broader conversation about the like search for purpose, a sense of purpose and meaning. I think everyone experiences that. Everyone has that those questions that emerge in their heads of, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And what's the meaning of all of this? And I think that these are very difficult questions, right? Especially when probably we want to have immediate answers. Sometimes the answers take a little bit longer, and I think are kind of filled out by the life experiences that we accrue along the way. And it's never a straightforward path. Sometimes there's underbrush, and you have to like cut through a lot of that. But it sounds so wonderful that there was this this moment at a very important point where you're about to go off to college, and you were afforded this opportunity to like kind of get this new understanding and faith tradition, and have this compass to guide you through probably many more struggles that were ahead of you, and also to have a community, right? Not just that friend of yours, but also to really share your own enthusiasm and appreciation for what the church has given to you, and Yeah, and pay it forward. So, now with all of that being said, you mentioned, okay, now there's this foray into education, right? Well, why exactly education? What was like the initial attraction of wanting to go to that field rather than, the Air Force, like your brother?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, and not a knock at the military, I mean, if you know the backstory, my adopted dad is a Vietnam veteran, a Marine. My uncles, my adopted, the end of this family, all his brothers went into the military. My adopted sister, one of them she tried the Air Force as well, but didn't pan out for her. And then here's my brother. He makes a career out of that, right? He's the only one who actually made a career of in that my sort of immediate family experience, and loved it. So again, and I'm a big supporter of those who choose to serve. But these are the things that have, again, my influence and the stuff that I've been around, and stories in there that have shaped my perspective as well on just what humans are and why they do what they do and all that. You asked me, so why education, right? And really fundamentally it comes down to what I experienced in college, in those 4 years, 4.5 years that I was at UC Santa Cruz. It's because of what I went through, who shaped me, my professors, my peers. College was just a whole new world of opportunity and experience and learning and growth and being challenged. And, I mean, I was picked and prodded, and intellectually, personally, spiritually. I mean, I went through some stuff, right? And again, those were just those more needed growth moments, right? That as a young person, I needed uh, again, to kind of round me out, right, as a human being, right, um to help me see things on a more holistic level, right, of how life is and how things just work in the world and how it impacts individual to societies, right? And I mean, we're just, as as scholars, you just kind of learn all of these things. You're taking all these courses and from different disciplines. I was liberal arts, just like you and others at Soka University who graduated with those degrees. And so I had a lot of, there was, the intellectual happening, right? Growth and, um, preoccupation with just ideas, right? Things I've never heard of before, concepts, theories, and, all of that was just working in my spirit and my mind. And I was just, I'm like, okay, I just want to try to figure this out. Like, give me kind of the grand theory of it all, right? But it doesn't happen that way. You got to just work through it, right? And even some of the stuff, you accept things that you just maybe sometimes can't fully understand, but you just know that you still need to keep walking and doing your work. And um, some of those early notions of just trying to be the best human being that I could be even then, right? Knowing that I still have a lot of years to grow and learn and right, and and just do life. And so it was really those years in college that shaped kind of this notion of like, wow, what an environment where I was shaped, right, to really then move me into my adult years, right? There was also spiritually with that. I was connected to, a strong church body with my peers who would go to, Bible studies at the church, right? We were just surrounded by a lot of great mentors, spiritual mentors, but then, again, also in the academic realm, a lot of amazing human beings that were, impacting our lives as well and growing us in many ways. And so education for me became, I think, that professional calling that I was then now searching for once I was, getting ready to leave Santa Cruz and with my psychology degree and, my social psych research, right, that I'm all proud of. I'm like, oh, I'm studying groups and da da da. I'm like, but how does this apply? Where could I apply it? And one thing kind of led to another, again, just to keep this moving. There's, with more backstory, but I was in the Silicon Valley working when I graduated, and for about 3 years, I did contracting work, temping work, just to get professional experience. And through that, Scott, I learned what I really didn't want to do career-wise, even though the Silicon Valley up near San Francisco, right, South Bay, San Jose, Santa Clara, I was in all in that area, Menlo Park, these cities, working jobs just to get experience. But I realized that there was a certain value or experience in the corporate world that just wasn't fulfilling for me. And that got me to dive deeper into like, okay, so what do I do with this? Where do I go with this? And there was a lot of prayer. I was seeking a lot of spiritual wisdom and guidance, and I was getting it. And like I said, one thing kind of led to another, and then a door opened for me through UC Santa Cruz, my alma mater, to be a UC outreach counselor for working with students from underrepresented backgrounds in a rural community south of Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Castroville area, right? These two cities where I applied to this job, I got it, and literally that started my journey in higher ed in 2000.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
And this what you're talking about with like your experiences within education,
yes,
it truly was something that you just lived and breathed, and you were fully immersed, and you
yeah,
couldn't get enough of it, and
yes.
that really informed what the next it made your decision probably much easier when, after doing all these different temp jobs, that you were like, I don't know about this, that didn't feel good, and then
Yeah,
it just clicked,
it did. I had
right?
some real epiphanal moments in those contracting positions, and one of them was actually working for Apple Computer in a purchasing department for like a couple of weeks. Right? These were just short assignments because I just wanted to get experience and build my resume. But but what I was seeing going from from a startup office management position, right, office coordinator, to working again for this global company Apple and Fujitsu Microelectronics. That was another one that came along. There was the culture of those workspaces was not resonating with my core values. And I think for many of us, right, when we find that we're in work that doesn't align with our passion, right, like what we really are about, who we are as a human being, um, a lot of it felt transactional to me, in terms of how these businesses were operating, and it's about making money. And it's, again, nothing wrong with making money, but I think how some of these corporations were, I think, going about it, it just didn't resonate with me. Right. And again, that was okay. Like for some people that's a good fit. But for me, I was like, no, this is just not doing it. And I was really struggling with that. And I think I was, I was trying to figure out like, where am I going to go, beyond this point. And that's, again, eventually education. The field of education, K through 16, was where it happened for me. And once I jumped in, Scott, it's like, putting on shoes that just fit just perfectly, right? Like new shoes, and you're just like, wow, this is tailored for me, right? I'm tailored for this.
Mm.
And yeah, and it
Yeah.
just, I could then now really fully put my soul, my heart, my passion, what what has shaped me as a human being. I feel like I could give that to this field and
Mm.
be a contributor to the lives of young people, right? Because that was also the other connection for me on a spiritual level. Is like many of the students that I was working with, there was some similar histories that we had been on in upbringings and life struggles and things that I know I had overcome, and things that I grew into, right, as a result of my formative years, that I felt like I could provide at least some insight, into those burning questions that young people had about their own existence, right? Why am I at
Yeah,
this
that
college? And
empathy.
right. And somebody asked me, well, why do I have to, what is a global citizen? I'm like, well, that's a great question. Let's unpack that. Right. I mean, a couple Stoker students, they asked me like, what is it? What should that be? Right. Like, 'cause they're trying to figure that out for themselves. Right. And so again,
Yeah.
I was like, well, let's talk. Let's just have a dialogue. Let's share our stories and experiences, and maybe we come up with something that is more definitive for each of us. Right.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you this question now, because once you had decided, okay, higher education is that is your place, that you were going to make your biggest impact, and you're going to like really like launch into your career, and you talked about how important values are, and you know you eventually found your way to Soka University, and talk about alignment of values, and finding a community that you know I think really resonated with your own deeper values. You spent a good stint of time, I would say, many,
10
many
years
years,
of my life.
10
And
years.
Alejandra, my wife, was with me, as you know, the entire time. Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. Huge shout out to Ale
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you, my brother.
And, you know, um, over that span of 10 years at a school where they, have as their mission to foster global citizens committed to living a contributive life, you've encountered many, many SUA students
Mm-hmm.
and now graduates.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, like any takeaways that you can kind of offer to us as far as what, yeah, those conversations that you had with these students were when they asked you, oh my gosh, am I a global citizen? What does that even mean? Like I'm sure that there were moments where they were trying to kind of unpack it in real time, other times where they would offer up certain understandings, and then times where you would extend your own personal experiences. But I mean, it's a pretty broad concept. But I wanted to ask, like, how does that kind of
Yeah.
land with you?
That's a great question. There's a lot to that too, just in terms of experience. But I will lay a key sort of part of that journey, right? So you talked about it, the alignment, right, with values, right? Because I talked about it earlier, right? I'm like, I don't want to be a part of something, and most humans can't not be a part of something that really doesn't align with who you are as a human being, right? You're going to find that dissonance in your what you care about and the fact that it's not matching with what the work you're expected to do, right? Or you're carrying out. And so the resolution of that is you find that, and you keep searching until you find it, and so Soka was really, it was another stepping stone, to be quite honest, in that process of me a lot feeling like that was what my calling is, and how to and who I'm serving in this life, right? And supporting being, that community of college students, right? Young people, young adults. um it was, Soka came along at just the next right moment. Prior to this, again, is another story you don't know, but when I was working at UC Santa Cruz in student life for a couple of years, I was at two new colleges that were just developed, right? They call them C9 and C10, College 9 and College 10. One College 10 was social justice and community, and the others that was their theme in College 9 was international and global perspectives. And so the concept of global citizenship came out through literally the College 9 theme, because of the college theme, right? And their core course was all about addressing global issues, and helping students understand how they are a global citizen, what that looks like in the context of all of these complex issues and subjects, right? Looking at politics, economics, right? Social issues, right? Health issues, education. Like, how does all how are we engage with all of this, right? And not just domestically, but you know how does this stuff play out in the world in other spaces, right? And so that, again, Soka came along at like, it was like the baton being handed on, right? And then, but what was so amazing about Soka, and uniquely different than the two colleges I came from, was a mission statement that emphasize fostering the steady stream of global, like building that capacity as an entire college, as a university, right? And I was like, I'm all in. And two phone calls later with Michelle Hobby, Amir's, and I was offered the position, because we just, like, I found and heard the values that I wanted to continue, exploring with student work, right, in a collegiate context. Some of the program, I asked her, like, so what are you doing to engage students? Like, what are some of your programs look like? What are some of these initiatives? How are you building and enabling and empowering the young people of Soka, right, to be global citizens as your mission? And it just clicked. And I'm like, I'm there, I'm on it. So one thing led to another, and I visited the campus, and Michelle says, I'll fly you out so you can at least check out the campus and see what you think. And I'm like, I'm like, my wife will also be sold on this one too. So, and she was working in up in Northern California, Sacramento area, at the time, and I was in UC Santa Cruz. So it just, we're a little bit of long distance, but we figured that out, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is going to be the next place for us. And so, yeah, so I think everything about Soka was really, it was a continuation of that type of mindset of, like, why are we doing education, right? What is this about? And building the capacity of humans to contribute, right? To contribute to life and the things they care about, right? Because we all care about something, and we're all, right, moved to do something. And I've seen this countless times with students pursuing their passion as that's defined for them in this context of what a global citizen is, right?
Yeah, thank you, Julian. And I wanted to ask a follow-up question. When you when you were going through that interview process and then made your decision, and let's say you're on the plane heading over to Aliso Viejo, um, did you already see yourself as a global citizen? Was that something that you had like spoken about and then articulated? Like, what was that like in terms of like the entry point? Because I know that you had that experience in working with other programs that were very much aligned with that, but in terms of like what SOCA, like what you were learning about from SOCA and
Mm-hmm.
its mission statement
Mm-hmm.
and the programs that
Mm-hmm.
Michelle shared with
Mm-hmm.
you, like how did you convey like, oh, this is who I am as a global citizen?
Well, again, I think the language of the mission statement resonated with me because I felt like I was already, from my entry into the field of higher ed, is, as we talked about earlier, right? I wanted to do what I could to serve others, right? To serve students, right? I felt like that was what I was meant to do. And um being engaged with students from multiple walks of life, right? Domestic students, international students. I mean, I wish Soka would have been the first, but it wasn't. In terms of that experience, like I was already being exposed to life experiences, right, from other people. Even as a student, I mean, UC Santa Cruz is a global institution. I mean, we have students and faculty from all across the globe, right? So these earlier notions of being connected to citizens beyond my own, national, experience, right? State experience was already happening. And I think because of the fact that I was able to meet people from different parts of the world, prior to Soka, like again, those seeds were being planted for me around how powerful that experience is, like, and what happens when we put ourselves in a position where we get to experience that difference, right? Hearing life stories from others, right, that are very, very different from my own especially, right, but able to have this interconnection where we're sharing stories and narratives so that we get deeper perspective of each other and humans, right. um that was happening, right, in organic ways and classroom discussions and hanging out and doing I was a student activities assistant at UC Santa Cruz, right. I mean, so it's funny, like I end up getting involved in a work where at the college university level that was a continuation of that from a professional full-time professional standpoint, right. uh but I was inspired by those experiences, right, to then now be able to do that work in a professional capacity with students. And so, you know, Soka, like I said, it just was a continuation of that for me. Uh, but knowing that this was the emphasis of the entire, you know, college, right? The university, it was just like, wow, this is the air this place breathes, right? And every student is being engaged on this concept because it's in our mission. It's who we are, right? This is the culture that we are building, right? Is in this campus community, staff, faculty included, right? All feeding into this experience, learning and growing from each other, and again creating the programs that, while we are in that planning process, right, we want to make sure that we're hitting those essential needs, that the academic and out of classroom experiences, as you know, right. We try to just put all that stuff together, in this holistic formula, right? I'd call it, to tap into as many life experiences as possible, and for students to engage each other, engage us, we engage them. We're just learning and growing together, right? And for me, I think that concept of global citizen, when I was asked by students, like, what does that mean to you? I'm like, well, I think this is what it's about. It's that we're connected to each other, right? We are choosing to be in spaces that are uncomfortable. We are choosing to expose our minds and our intellects to ideas that are new, right, and different, and you know, and stretching us in ways that we could never imagine, right? Um, and then I would ask them questions like, So what do you care about as a human being, right? What gets you up in the morning, right? Why did you choose this university and not someplace else, right? What drew you, right, to this place? And I think it was more of those asking questions of students when I was asked that question about global citizen, because I will give you a definition, but that's my own definition, right? I don't have your experiences. And so I want to find out from you, like, who are you? What are you about? Right? What do you care about? Like I said, what makes you tick? And I think those questions led to conversations, just really organic and deep conversations about what that looked like for folks. And I think in many senses, that definition for students became clearer in some of those conversations. And in some senses, it was like, wow, one one question leads to another, and then you realize there's just so much that I just will never really understand about this concept, because it's just so bigger than any given person, right? It's like, I mean, the word global in and of itself, right, is you know, how can we really get our heads around what that even is, right? And then we look at global citizenship and being a part of a global community, if we're, as kind of loosely defined, and maybe in that sense, it just conjures up so many more questions, right, than what we feel like we know or have answers for.
If I may add a few thoughts, you know, you asking those questions to the students is so important. It's truly the hallmark of a great educator, to put back, these questions that are really getting at their deeper interests, their passions, but also just their humanity, right? Giving them the not just the permission, but like encouraging them to say, like, hey, really show up as your genuine, authentic self. You have doubts, that's part of it. Bring that as well. You have concerns, I'm here to support you. And being able to create that kind of space for someone to think through these difficult questions, but also I think pairing that with a mission statement that's meant to be, very empowering, that's meant to be forward looking, that's also meant to be altruistic. I think that's a powerful recipe for cultivating global citizens and allowing them to arrive at their own definition, their own understanding. I know for me, I don't know if I would necessarily say I walked away from SUA with this neatly kind of thought of definition, but I do know that it left a profound mark on me in kind of constantly asking myself, am I really embodying this ideal? And I would ask myself this many, many times, and I still ask myself this. And that invitation to continue to reflect and expand on kind of where I'm at and who I'm becoming, I think is really important. And then another thing too that I wanted to comment on is that, the just from what you shared about your own background, it sounds like you were the kind of learner, or student and learner, and just person who really wanted to engage others, who really wanted to hear people out, who wanted to engage in those differences. You kind of just threw yourself into the kind of, flames of just discussion that, you were able to kind of just learn about many different kinds of people. And I just think that that's such an important way to grow, that oftentimes, we can be sheltered or we can be standoffish, but to have that kind of mentality of I might not become best friends with this person, or I might not like even what they say, but having an openness, an eagerness, and a curiosity to still say, there's something of value here that maybe I can resonate with, or I can learn from, or maybe this person just needs to be heard. And this is me extending some kind of, gift in itself of creating that space, because I've been afforded that space myself. So much of these exchanges, the kind of give and take, the consideration, the thoughtfulness, the sincerity, all of that, I feel like really kind of coalesces in your own understanding of global citizenship, of that interconnectedness that you talked about. And so I wanted to ask if you could share very briefly, because I know the current work that you're doing is no longer at SUA, and but it's in the field of DEI, and I wanted to ask if you can briefly share just kind of what are you currently engaged with, and how does global citizenship also continue to play a role in that?
Mhm. Great question. Yeah. So now I am a part of the Orange County Fire Authority, and they're a joint powers authority, and that's a key part because we're not a municipality. We actually are supported by 23 cities in Orange County, so they're part of getting this joint powers authority. That's why they term it that. And so we serve nearly 2 million residents, right, and community members, and in that, just the diversity of just where people come from, right, that they've chosen Orange County as their home and our member cities. And so, the fire service is all about saving lives and property. Right, that's kind of the motto. But my role as a diversity inclusion coordinator gets to bring in, other lenses around what that service looks like, right, to the community. And so it's not just doing what we need to do operationally because we're trained to do that, right? Like our firefighters and first responders and nurse educators and, fire prevention specialists, you name it, on down the line of the frontline, folks that are really keeping the community safe. But how are we doing the human work, right? How are we making those connections across culture, language, custom, tradition? When, a part of our demographic is, we're still working on reflecting more of the communities that we serve, right? And so that's where the DEI piece for me comes in, right? And I get to teach on concepts because, again, things that I have been engrossed in myself as a career, right? My own trainings and development around concept like implicit bias and decision making, right? Culture, humility, competency, right? How these things play out in decisions we make that affect others, right? Maybe from even family to professional, right? I mean, it's not just unique to our workspaces, because again, as I talked about, it's the human work that, right, that I have been about since I've been in as a full-time professional, right? And that got solidified with really my interest into education. So it's just been a continuation, right, since a lot of this work, and I think to a point in my own human growth where I've had a lot of time to work out these concepts in my own life, working a lot with students from, and experiences that are, global, truly global, staff and faculty as well, and my colleagues. I've attended countless conferences on a number of issues that have global citizenship sort of implications, from how we do education, why are we doing it the way we're doing it, right? How do we as educators, right, do better at what we do, right? Are we listening to students? Are we, it's all of that, so Scott. So I feel like I bring all that capacity and experience, but still learning and growing too as a human, right? I always, yesterday I was like, I talked about with cultural humility, I can be an expert in a given topic and still not know much about anything beyond my expertise, right? That's just the reality. And I think that the part about accepting that humility posture, right, is to recognize that, I am also still a student of life, right? And the ability to remain open to learning new experiences, even though you may be grounded solidly in certain things. We also have to recognize that there's a lot. I told our audience, I'm like, be okay with not knowing what we don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know, and that humility of just accepting that is not a negative thing that we're putting upon us. We're just saying that, what, we recognize that our lenses, have a reach to a certain capacity, right, in the world. And I always need to leave myself open to learning new things from other people.
Oh, I love that.
So,
No, I love the
yeah.
the humility posture that you spoke about, the lifelong learning component, and all of that ties into not just the evolution of the work that you're doing, but also I think this concept of global citizenship, in that we're continuously striving towards bettering ourselves, bettering our communities, right, both local and global. And I think it's just so wonderful that you're able to really hit this stride in your career of making the impact that you want in the community that you live in, and bringing in all these experiences from conferences, from friendships that are very global in nature, but channeling that towards those many cities, right? The 2 million residents or community that you were speaking about, and what a career it's been. And you have a lot to still look forward to in terms of really extending that impact and continuing the human work that you were talking about. So Julian, thank you so much for sharing all of that. We've covered a lot, and I've learned a lot about
You learn some
your
new things, I'm
background as
sure.
well. Yeah, of course.
And
Every
likewise,
conversation with you, I'm
with
learning
you,
some
right?
new
Yeah,
things.
likewise, conversations are two-way in this sense. So yes,
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
appreciate you,
yeah,
Julian. And I wanted to ask one
yes,
final question, if that's
yes.
okay. And this is the book or movie recommendation. So anything you'd like to share to the listeners?
Okay, there's one book in particular, and they may seem outdated, but they're actually still very relevant. There's two books actually. So one is called The Lexus and the Olive Tree. It's by Thomas Friedemann, and he wrote it in 1999. But he basically contrasts globalization with human traditions, cultural traditions, right, and the sense of belonging and community. Um, and he contrasts how the pursuit of globalization, right, in that process, right, that really is about trying to bring more prosperity to the world and people, globally, right, comes with some challenges too, because right, that it's not always in alignment with, again, sort of human sort of desire to how we connect, and values, right, that we foster about how we want to live and be, and notions of prosperity can be very fluid across cultures and places and time and experiences. And sometimes so this process of globalization is not always connected and synced up with this notion of um, community and cultural tradition and practices, right? And so the olive tree, right? Um, the way so the olive tree represents the community, that this human sense of belonging, right? And the Lexus, right? The Lexus being, the car Lexus, right? But that's being, represents globalization, right? This new sort of way we want to pursue, and and all the feel goods that come with that. But if we don't think about the human impact of what globalization brings, right? Um, you know we can get ourselves into some issues right around that disconnect. And so it's a great book. I would say it's been many years ago, but the concepts and what Thomas Friedman was writing about, I think, were actually very forward thinking. And you can see today where how globalization has moved in the world, right, in these processes, economically, politically, that touch upon these areas, right, of societies, education, right, social experiences, um, how that's impacted for the better, and maybe for the worse in some situations, right? And so I think, as a global citizen, right, you want to read literature that challenges, right, some of these perspectives you may have, right, and we may have, and just gives you another way of looking at this concept. Another book would be The Soul of
Okay.
Politics by Jim Wallace. Recommend that as well.
Okay. Solo
The Soul
politics.
of Politics by Jim Wallace, 1994. But
Okay.
still very relevant books. There's many, but this is, if you ask me, ones that I've actually have engaged. Uh, yeah, really great stuff.
All right. Thank you so much, Julian, for those two recommendations. And and also, yet again, thank you so much for taking this time to share your story, to share your insights along your career, and just continuing to do the human work. I find in the times that we're living in feels more and more under strain, like this pressure of what does it even mean, right, to be human in a when the dominant conversation is around increased globalization, mechanization, and AI, and like the encroachment of like technology on like all of these different facets of our lives. And yeah, I find myself grappling with these questions, but it makes me feel so much better knowing that there are people like you out there doing the work, who are continuing to shine their bright light on others, being that model for others to really emulate, like take notice and emulate themselves. And I just have a lot of appreciation for you, Julian. So thank you, and want to give you the last word. Just, any final send off as we wrap up our conversation.
First of all, thank you, Scott, for providing this time in our friendship, which expands, many, many years now, and seeing you grow from a student to where you're at today and your adult life is just awesome. Continue to create the value that you're creating, right? You're creating spaces where this conversation for global citizenship and other relevant topics can happen, right? You keep it present, you keep it moving, and so like you, you inspire me as well, because you give me hope that I know that the generations coming through, right, are really going to be value contributors to the world, and try to, right, make things meaningful, and that generally contributes to the betterment of the world, right, in whatever way you care about. And so thank you so much for being you, just being authentic, man. And I know you, and I could say this because you emanate that as well. And so thank you for just being the great human being that you are. And I'm grateful for our friendship.